That's a good question. So I think like every kid, I started off as a biker, right? And it was a fun way to get around independently without having to rely on your parents. And and as an adult, it's a fun way to get around independently without having to rely on fossil fuels. So like it's a wonderful thing. It's healthy for me. It's better for the planet. It saves money. There's just zero downside except for the occasional rainstorm. But as a biker, I've developed very good skills at mooching rides home from people when I need it.
No, I was really thinking about it before the podcast, driving up here. I was like, all right, it's sprinkling just a little bit. I was like, is Sheila going to ride her bike or not? What is there like a breaking point at which you're like, all right, no bike right now?
So I bike for transportation, and I bike for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And in general, like my husband and I took a 22-mile ride this morning, and the rules for a fun ride is if it's raining when you're starting, no, pack it up and go back inside.
Mm-hmm.
But for transportation around Carbondale, as long as there's no lightning and it's not just a downpour that you can't see through, I'll go on my bike. The more significant standard is how many degrees down will I go on the thermometer. And there I've made it down to 20, and I've decided that 20 and below is just not smart to be out biking because I can't figure out how to keep my eyes warm. And I remember riding back one day as a teacher at SIU. You get to take a class for free at SIU anytime. It's the most fabulous gig around. And I was coming back from a French class and choosing to alternate which eyes I was closing. And I thought, that's just a sign that I should not be biking today. Yeah.
That's quite...
Isn't it ridiculous?
That's quite the mindset about it. Is because I'm a motorcycle guy. I'm used to two wheels, just not in a particular fashion. And your helmets don't generally come with face shields.
Right. Maybe that's what I need. Maybe I need a motorcycle helmet, and then I can drop it down lower than 20 degrees. Or maybe that's just not smart anyway.
I will say it worries me when I see folks riding or skateboarding or any sort of anything that puts the body in motion on wheels without some sort of cranial protection.
Oh, I always wear a helmet. Absolutely. Yeah. Because we've got a lot invested in here, right?
Yeah. That is quite the good spot for a segue, because we hope that you'll invest up here for the 80th episode of the WTF Carbondale podcast, where we talk to interesting people about their interesting lives and tie it all back to this little old place we call home, Carbondale, Illinois, and somebody who is so Carbondale it hurts. With a name synonymous with Southern Illinois. Sheila Simon, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So Schwartz, after so many years, finally got a nice redoing, right? This is, shucks, it's maybe been 5-6 years now, or maybe longer at this point. But I rode my bike one time to a friend's house over just off of Schwartz, and coming off hot onto the really nice, freshly paved, like flat concrete, ready to go. Took a turn too sharp, bit it, flipped, landed on my head. If it wasn't for a helmet.
Helmet is very important. Yeah. Absolutely.
Is there a safety component? I mean, do you find yourself, under threat of the traffic around you, just navigating the general space and in a bicycle, and like how do you deal with that?
I am always watchful for drivers who are on their phones, who are looking at their phones, who are holding their phones illegally to their head while they're driving, because those folks are often the people who are going to run the red light or not see me. So I wait until I get eye contact from the driver before I go out in the road, because, not all of them are paying attention, and they're much more protected than I am. So
that's good.
I try to err on the side of caution. Yes.
Well, and then as we kind of get into the new bike infrastructure in town that's kind of all over the place, I feel like this is your jam. I'm just going to hand it over to you and let you do your thing.
Hey, can I say, in addition to Oakland, which has fabulous bike lanes now on both sides, all the way from the Burger King to campus. I just went 2 days ago to a meeting at City Hall, an opportunity to see the design for the new intermodal station. And I went to be the bike advocate. I went, you need to have bike parking there, and it needs to be sheltered. And they had it all in these, their very first draft kind of drawings, but they've got several different bike places to park in the design. One of them that's under a shelter. And they're talking about maybe even having bike lockers so that if you bike to the station and take the train up to Chicago and don't come back for a couple of days, you can actually lock your bike inside. And it's so cool because they said, well, we looked at all these things because we want this to be a LEED certified building. Yeah. And the LEED standards say, hey, think about bikers. And Carbondale's just, and stop me if I go on too long on this.
This is it.
Carbondale is the best place to bike in, right? Yeah. Climate-wise, you can bike almost all year long, as long as you don't mind a little heat. And, hey, you can change clothes when you get home. Yeah. There's just a little bit of time in the winter where you can't bike. It's mostly flat. We have no interstate cutting through town. We have no river cutting through town. So you can get wherever it is you need to go on your bike, and it's really cheap, and what a deal. Yeah.
Well, in the... we're expanding even now. $4 million for this pathway out through into Crab Orchard, which I imagine is pretty bike centric as well.
Yeah, we bike out that way, but always on roads. So to have a safe way to go along 13 to get out that way towards Crab Orchard and have access to the roads within the refuge there is going to be fabulous. Along with, we're on the National Bike Trail. Right, the Bicentennial Bike Trail that goes from the West Coast to the East Coast passes through Carbondale, Illinois.
Have you made friends through that you still keep in contact with? Is that something that you've ever delved into as they come through town?
We've had, the most recent time was 2 bikers who were grad students in international studies who wanted to call attention to the need for more diversity in people studying international studies, decided to do that by way of a bike ride across the United States. Maybe not the best PR plan, but we're happy to help them, and we had them stay at our house and put them up. They actually stayed 2 nights because it was super hot, and it was really fun to hang out with them and to watch them eat. Man, oh man, could these kids put away food.
Oh, I'm sure.
1 man, 1 woman, and we had already planned to have dinner with a bunch of folks over that night, so we're cleaning up the table, and they're like, oh, is no one going to eat this? We're like, sure, go ahead. And there was just nothing left over because they just ate everything. Yeah. It was a beautiful thing to see.
Well, and you got to have that caloric intake if you're going to be putting the pedals to the road like that.
Right, and they were, rail thin, skinny little toothpicks of people just shoveling it in. Yeah.
Oh, that's too funny. Yeah. That's too funny. Well, like I was saying before the podcast, kind of one of the big jumping off points is people's origin story of how they came to be in Carbondale. And you're not originally a born and raised Carbondale person, as some people may or may not assume.
Right. Right. So I was born in Troy, Illinois, closer up to St. Louis, the Metro East area. And our family moved, from Troy to Springfield for a while. And then when Kenny Gray announced the first time that he wasn't going to run for office again, because he was in office and then was out of office and then in office again, Dad decided that he would run for that seat in Congress, and that's when we moved to Carbondale, and have been Jackson County residents ever since. That was a long time ago, like the 70s. Yeah. That sounds like a really long time ago now that I think about it. Yeah.
Is there any particular thing that's just kept you and Perry here, just saying, oh, well, we want to raise the family here. This is the best place that we could ever have thought to be, regardless, and so we're going to keep it going.
So my husband Perry is from Randolph County, from Steelville, Illinois, so not too far away. You could bike there. Yeah.
Have you guys biked there?
Oh yeah. And so we're both from the area, and we've both spent time away from Southern Illinois as well. Yeah. He, in particular, in the Peace Corps, he was in Ecuador And so he's lived away. I've lived out in D.C. a bunch. And so we both can compare Southern Illinois to other places in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the comparison to Washington, D.C. is, while I love Washington, and there's amazing people and amazing things to do, it's just so driven. It's so goal-oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And back here, I find that the way I phrase it is there's a better balance between mission and barbecue, right? Is that we have our missions, and we also take time to enjoy cooking out in the backyard and hanging out with our friends.
Yeah.
And that, at least for me, is a good fit.
Yeah.
And then, when we got married and we actually mooched off my parents, we lived at their house in Makanda when we were first married.
Nice.
And then we moved into town before our older daughter, Riley, started school because we wanted her and our next daughter, Brennan, when she arrived, we wanted them to be able to go to school in Carbondale because we see tremendous advantages to the Carbondale school system. And
Yeah.
you know that as a Carbondale
absolutely.
guy. It's not something that a lot of people focus attention on, but the size of Carbondale is just right for a school system that can include everybody, right? So the way it was, this, your first grade buddies are going to be with you in your first grade school and your second grade school, and then they'll all go to the third and fourth grade school together. So every time you go to the grocery store with your parents and you see another third grader, you're going to know the third grader, no matter where that third grader is from in Carbondale.
Yeah.
You're going to know that person. And given that Carbondale has a rich diversity of population, that means people get to know each other. I have plenty of friends and family members who live in larger cities with bigger populations and even more diversity than we have, right?
Yeah.
But because of where they live, which is often separate from each other, they don't get to experience it,
Yeah.
right? But Carbondale, we're all here together. We've got, and now we have more than one, but we've got a farmer's market, right? We have a Carbondale library, places that we can all get together no matter what part of town, because we do have residential segregation in Carbondale historically.
Yep.
But no matter where we're from in Carbondale, we have things that bring all of us together, and that's a cool thing. That's not available everywhere.
What's it like growing up in a household that probably had a better grasp on these issues, like you just mentioned, residential segregation, right, and the social issues that we have as a country, whether they're of our own making or whether they simply exist, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because it's a difference between the world that I'm raising my kids in now, right, and where they probably hear a lot of stuff that's very similar to a lot of what their friends and their friends' parents had to say, but maybe the thoughts that your dad had and your mom had and shared around the house weren't necessarily jiving directly with the entirety of the conversation, back in the 70s, 80s, what have you.
Yeah, I suppose there were definitely ways that mom and dad sort of stood out, and the things that they cared about stood out. I know they would tell the story often because the first time that they really spent time together was when they were both in the Illinois State House. How super nerdy is that? I just love it. And one of the things that drew them together was that they were, I don't know whether they were the only two or one of the few white representatives to list their membership in the NAACP in the Illinois State Blue Book. So that was like, oh yeah, that Paul Simon, he's a cool guy. And he's like, oh yeah, that Jean Hurley, she's pretty cool. And so then they started going on. Their first dates were not really dates. They would, like, Dad would arrange some kind of like, let's visit state institutions to supervise, what we're doing, to learn more about how the state works. And Mom's like, okay, fine. So that's how they started seeing each other. Isn't that sweet?
Is that is there any balance between that story and your and Perry's story? Was it also a political engagement, and one of you said, well, let's go to learn about this state institution, and the other was like, you know what, that sounds pretty good?
Kind of tragically, yes. So Perry and I had met to like say hello to each other previously, but the first time we actually talked to each other was at a Democratic picnic at Riverside Park in Murfreesboro. And so we're talking there. This is when Adlai Stevenson ran for governor and didn't win, and but it was a great campaign, a great effort, and he was there speaking, but Perry and I were off in the back talking with each other, and in the end he gave me his business card he said, I work at a farm advocacy nonprofit group. You ought to have my card. Yeah.
And the butterflies just went.
Yeah. Seriously. So we went out to a movie at when the theater used to be in the mall the first time around, right? And we saw a movie, and the movie wouldn't have even mattered, but it was called Desert Hearts. It was a lesbian love story in Carbondale in 1987, 86. And there was lots of humorous elements in it, and a lot of the people in the audience were just like uncomfortable. And Perry laughed at every single one of the jokes. I'm like, well, I just really like this guy. 10 days later, he asked me to marry him, and yeah.
What?
That's right.
What?
10 days, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes because I had already calculated this is the right guy, and I'm gonna go about 30 days, and at that point, if he doesn't ask me to marry him, I'm gonna ask him to marry me. So
wow,
I know. And then we didn't tell anyone for a long time because we're like, that's ridiculous. No one will think that we're sane, and we probably weren't sane, but that's 33 years ago, and we've been happily married ever since.
My wife tells me I was kind of the last person that any of my friends, anybody around me ever thought would get married at any point in time in my life. I just got to do a bad job of holding very personal relationships. And my wife loves to tell the story of the first time I met him, I knew. And she went and she told her father and said, this is the man that I'm going to marry.
Really?
And that was that. And I didn't know it for a year and a half. But
wow, but she knew
was
right away. That's cool. That's very cool.
So I can dig on the just, you guys both knew.
That's right, it's right.
And you almost like, I think the other interesting component of that is the speed at which both of you moved, like not willing to just sit on your hands and hope and think and whatever. And no, you're just like, all right, I got to act.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So how long have you been married now?
Let's see. 2019, March 28th. Yeah.
Using your fingers?
Yeah, I'm getting through it. So it's only been a couple years now, but I mean, still it's a couple years into a lifetime.
Yeah. A good thing.
Yeah. And it's, for me, it's cool. The step kids are twins. They are 11 now, living in Grandpa's old house that I bought when he passed away several years ago. And it's just like, it's very, like, it feels like the story that's supposed to be in the place where it is, right? And so like I go home at any point in time, day or night, and it just feels like, oh, this is what's supposed to be here. Like this is how this space is supposed to be occupied. And
that's
so
wonderful. Yeah. Cool.
I just get that feeling. Oh, now you got me off on all feeling butterflies and emotions and all that fun stuff. I appreciate that.
That works. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and then we were talking about the kids again before jumping on the podcast here. So you've got Riley, and then your other daughter's name.
Our other daughter's Brennan.
Yeah.
So Riley is living out in D.C. with her husband. She's working at the State Department. And Brennan is Brennan was in the Peace Corps in Mongolia when the pandemic started, and almost done with her 2 years there. But we sort of kept an informal watch on the airports that you can leave from Mongolia. And one by one, they were all shutting down, and it finally got to Russia was the only way to get out. And then the State Department said, yeah, we're sending all the Peace Corps volunteers home. There's a really large bug crawling up your cord, by the way, just so that you know.
That it is.
It's
pretty
enormous.
Cricket. And
it's a cricket.
Really hate crickets, but that's okay. We're just gonna
stay there and
leave it
enjoy
alone
the show.
and hope that it doesn't jump into me because I will lose my mind.
Oh yeah, send it my way.
Yeah, there we go.
Great.
Now
Thanks, Nathan.
Now it's smooth. Yeah. Well,
anyway,
please stay there.
Yeah. It'll be fine. It's now that I know it's a cricket, I'm okay with that.
I've got an idea. Keep talking.
Yeah.
I've got an idea here.
So Brennan came home from Mongolia, and she has a job in New York City, which she's working remotely from the basement in Mom and Dad's house in Makanda. Oh, yeah.
The cricket is going to be a thing. Oh, my God.
So I'm going to be now offering the play-by-play on the
of how
capture of the cricket. Nathan is now disassembling a water bottle and is going to try and get a cricket in a water bottle. Oh, and it jumped, and it's got it.
And now it's losing its mind.
Now...
We're just going to leave it alone.
Now the cricket is going to reside there for the remainder of the podcast, after which Nathan can slip a piece of paper and escort the cricket outside. Or I'll do that if he's got the willies about that.
That is and this goes back to the partnership component. My wife is the bug handler in the house. Oh. I am not I do not. Well, it's not my thing.
Sounds like you married well.
Yeah, this is a very she'll I'll tell her this story and she'll be like, "I'm real proud of you, Nathan. You took charge of the situation because you didn't have a choice."
Yes, you did, and the cricket appears to be fairly calm where the cricket is right now.
It doesn't, and we'll see if it tries to start jumping. And anywho, so you're trying to get your daughter the cricket motions out of Mongolia.
Yes.
Start hopping.
Yeah, so she made it out of Mongolia, and I don't think she really envisioned spending her 26th year on the planet in such close proximity with her parents, but we think it's wonderful. We've enjoyed it very much. And then since the vaccination and things loosened up, before recently they started to go the wrong direction again. Mm-hmm. She's been traveling around the country and seeing a bunch of her friends and working remotely from their places, which is kind of a fascinating thing about how this has all gone down, is that we've developed new ways to get our work done that are kind of cool, right?
What's it been like for you as a teacher making this transition?
Stinky. Stinky. And now just having the mask thing reimposed at the law school on campus, I was so looking forward to seeing my students' faces. I took one semester at SIU with the benefit of being able to take a class. I took a class in the Irish language. They had a teacher from Ireland. She was fabulous. And there was just 6 of us maybe in the class. And I'd always thought, I'm, pretty good at learning languages. This will be fun. My mother's family is Irish. I'll get to learn some heritage stuff. And I was the one in class who was just so often sitting there with that face on, like, what? And so it gave me great new appreciation for when my students have that face. I'm like, okay, just went over that one too fast. Let's back up. And with the masks on, all I've got is their eyes. And with social distancing, man, they were, the first semester, I taught a class of like 30 people-ish in the auditorium at the law school. So some of them are just crazy far back, and I can't see even whether they're going cross-eyed with what I'm telling them. So I'm looking forward to getting back to a little bit more interaction with my students. Now, we've always had the ability for students to be zooming in, and I can see them a little better, but...
Computer screens only do so much.
Yeah, I know my participation in meetings and conferences that are over Zoom is not of the highest quality. I get a lot of other work done, I'll say. So I'm looking forward to getting everyone vaccinated and getting back to where we can be in person again, see that reaction, get that sense of immediacy, get my students engaged. Because particularly the first-year students, property law, which is what I teach the first-year students, is maybe not everyone's dream of, I get to learn property law today. Tell me more about the old Englishmen in tights. It takes a little bit to get engaged, and I work on that, but it helps if we're all in the same room together. So
is there a pretty strong history component to some of the teaching that you do in this case then? And I'm going to relate this back to John Davey at the School of Architecture, because when I did his podcast, he was talking about how he would come in dressed up as figures from the periods of architecture that he was discussing, right? And that his teaching wasn't just about, well, here's how you can build this and here's that shape and whatever else, that there was so much more to it. The nuance of the stories that have led to what is in place now, and very similar, I would imagine, with law, that there's so much story behind it.
It's a lot of history, and a lot of our law, particularly property law, is built on really ancient English stuff. So yeah, I'll have to call up John and see more
How
about
are you
his
handling this?
costumes. I have not gotten into costumes yet myself, although I have forced my students to don costumes. And I do give them the award for something spectacular in my property class is livery of season. I'll have to take a minute to explain this. So ancient English days, before there were lots of records about who owned property, they wanted to do something that people could remember. And they would hand a clod of dirt, sometimes with a stick in it, from the person who was selling the property to the person who was getting the property. And they'd call around a young person in the community, maybe your 11-year-old twins, to have them watch this ceremony. And then also sometimes they would kick the kid so the kid would remember it even better. Right. This is called livery of season.
Like literally marking the child so that is almost like
Right.
the signature that...
So 30 years from now, this person is going to be an adult and he's going to be like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was horrible. My next door neighbor kicked me in the behind while they gave a clod of dirt to the other guy. And so there we go. There's our witness. We now know who owns the property. So I do, in fact, as an award in class, when someone does something spectacular, do give out livery of season, which in this case involves no physical violence, just the handing of a dirt clod to my student. Who wouldn't want that? I have challenged every single one of them who's received it to list it on their resume because I know that would get a question in an interview. What? You got the livery of season award from Professor Simon?
that and that translates to a good conversation among whoever they're having that conversation with that's trying to hire them.
They're going to know about livery of season. They're going to remember this weird story from their first year of law school.
Great, you have a 3.9 GPA and this and that and the other accolade, but you were able to string together a very personable component to your time in school and hand that off to us as a reason why you're a more well-rounded person for this position.
Exactly. And I'll tell you, one of the neat things about SIU, we're one of the smaller law schools in the country. I really do get to know my students. And when someone calls up with a reference question, I can say, oh yeah, this is a student who was always ready for class. This is a student who turned in flawless papers because they asked a lot of questions in advance. I really know my students. I know which ones of them have really warped senses of humor and would be great to work with in an office, right? So yeah, it's a wonderful place to really get to know students. That motivates me greatly as a teacher.
Were you? I guess how long have you been teaching for? Like when did that?
Gosh. I started full-time at the law school when Brennan was 4 years old, and she's 26 now, so 22 years. Yeah, and I taught there part-time while doing other things before that.
Nice.
Yeah.
It all kind
Of course, I did take a little time off to do other things.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not like you haven't been, I don't know, the lieutenant governor of the state of Illinois or anything.
I have a hard time holding a steady job. Yeah.
Well, it's so funny to me in that sense. I've had mentors that chastise me regularly for, well, you don't hold a job this and you don't stay on focus that or blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, but do you see this big picture of a universe around me of which I have immersed myself into, and then just finding the work to do along the way? Not I go into work and I work the same job for 30 years and I cash out of retirement and that's that. That's people miss that component too. Just because you're not in one place all of the time doesn't mean you're not constantly working on a much grander vision of what you think the world could be around you.
Absolutely. And there's a big generational difference between folks my age and older and folks your age in terms of do I want to commit myself to a single employer for a career? And I think very few people find that that's a comfortable thing to say. I can make a commitment to my spouse that yes, this is going to stick and this is what I want to do. But no, I don't have to keep the same haircut, and I don't have to keep the same job if I find an opportunity to do something that fits me and the time and what I want to achieve in the big picture better.
Have you always been a short hair person? Now that you say haircut, I gotta ask.
I did have long hair, let's see, in college, and then I cut it off. And I was a high jumper in college, and I did much better when I cut my hair off. So I'm like, oh yeah, well that's clearly the key to success. Keep the haircut short. And then in law school, when I was on a very seriously limited budget, I went to, it could be considered a mullet.
Nice.
Something that I could cut, and I could cut my own. Whoops, sorry.
You're all right. You're good.
Cut my own front hairs because I can see those in a mirror. In the back, I just cut across like that. So the old no-cost haircut, and it was worth it, man. You could see all the value that was not put into that haircut. And now I'm a regular devotee of Judy at Hairbrains in Carbondale.
Nice.
Locally owned business.
You're like, this is.
She does much better than I ever did.
No more partial bowl cuts. Now I want you to. I mean, the mullets are fashionable again, Sheila. That's.
I know. So my buddy Cynthia Heisner at work, who I was telling you about earlier, who's a follower of your programs here, told me that her husband decided he needed to get a haircut, and he came back home with a mullet.
Oh
yeah.
Gosh.
So. He's maybe more of a pioneer than I know about. Let's hear it for Blaine Heisner.
the ebb and flow. There styles that were once will come back around again. I can't wait for 100 years from now when it's digital bell bottoms and now you've just got light up LEDs strewn about these giant pants, and I don't know. Yeah. I'm just throwing out silly stuff for the sake.
Yeah. Well, think about like the height or the length of men's basketball shorts. Yeah. Right? You can really tell they're like phones, right? If someone picks up like one of these, you're like, oh, okay, 80s. And if they've got the really short shorts on, you can tell that that's a different era than what we're in now. Yeah.
That is the truth. Right. Well, and on eras, so kind of stepping back into one of the things you had mentioned about having a love for language. When you would have gone through high school, would that have been some of the earlier days of David Mindrisky by chance, or was it not quite? He would have not quite been there. And I throw that out there just because I know David Mindrisky is just this well-known, multilingual teacher who's got decades in at the high school. And you mentioned foreign language, and somebody thinks David Mindrisky in Carbondale.
Unfortunately, I did not make any connections because we moved to the D.C. area when I started high school. Oh, so I didn't.
That makes sense.
I went to the old Lincoln Junior High, which is where the police station is now. It's a really old building, and then when Dad got elected to Congress, we moved out to the D.C. area. So I went to high school out there.
Oh, what was that a shock itself, going from a lifetime in at least some part of Southern Illinois?
That was huge. So here's one. So in 1976, the nation's bicentennial, Dad was back home here in Southern Illinois, but we were out in D.C. for the 4th of July. And we're sitting down around the Washington Monument, and we're watching the fireworks go up. And all we've experienced in our life before is Southern Illinois fireworks. And every single thing they shot up, we're like, that's the grand finale. That's it. It can't get better than that. And that was just the very beginning. So huge sizes of everything. Like the high school had 600 people in a graduating class that I went to out there. Just more people involved in everything. But again, more political opportunities, more opportunities to see parts of the world. I had a part-time job at a fabric store in the mall close to where we lived. Nice. And there'd be people come from everywhere speaking lots of other languages, which was very cool. So some of it was hard to get used to in terms of the number of people.
Yeah.
And some of it was really cool. Yeah.
So it's just always been around the politics. And when I say the politics, I don't mean the general, politics as much as the functional aspect of government. You've just always been around.
My parents met, like I said earlier, when they were in the State House. Dad was in elective office for pretty much all my life, except for 1 year when he lost. He ran for governor and lost in the primary, and so there was 4 years when he wasn't in elected office. Yeah, so that was normal for me.
Yeah.
And so when people ask, what's it like for that, and I'm like, well, what's it like to grow up with a dad who wasn't in politics?
Yeah.
That was just our family. But it did come with certain rules, and of course he was also a newspaper publisher.
Yes.
Right? So in the morning, my parents were both people of faith, but they had an even stronger faith in reading the newspaper in the morning, and breakfast time was not for chatting. Right? My buddies who would come and sleep over were like kind of surprised that no one said anything at breakfast. And it's because we're reading the newspaper, because that's what breakfast is. So
feed your body, feed your mind.
Right. Yeah. So I've definitely been engaged in the role as like a up close observer at the very least of the political scene for a lifetime, which is pretty fabulous, I have to say.
Was there always, or did it feel like there was an expectation of pursuing and participating in standing for election as well, or was that a decision, or over the course of time at different points, decisions that you made more on your own as opposed to, I've just got to look at my last name and my upbringing and just I have to do this?
I think my parents, it was kind of like a bottom line expectation. You and your brother have to be involved in some way.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't have to be the running for office, but you know enough about how this works. You've got to campaign for good people. You've got to be engaged. You've got to work on getting your friends out to vote. And it wasn't until, and people often ask me to run for office, I think because of Dad, right? It's like, oh yeah, you've got a great last name. Speaker Madigan once called me and asked me to run for the state house. This was many, many years ago. And I said, well, if you can move the state capitol back to Kaskaskia or Vandalia, I'll be happy to do that. He did not laugh. This is a man of very little humor. So I didn't run for the state house, because he didn't move the capitol back anywhere that would be useful to me.
What a shame.
Yeah. But I knew enough about politics and the commitment that it takes, that it's a total immersion kind of thing, that I did not want to do that when my girls were little.
Yeah.
On the other hand, when the old high school on Springer Street was closing down, folks in the neighborhood were organizing about, what's going to come next. Should we be involved? Should we have a say in this? And one of the folks in the neighborhood said, oh, you know what, Sheila, they're adding 2 people to the city council this year. You ought to run. And that one I thought about, and I thought, I can do that, and I can still be at home with the daughters, still go to work, not risking the family livelihood. And so I ran for city council and absolutely loved it. It was a really cool thing to be engaged in, both the process of running for office, which you know very well, and the process of serving in public office. So kind of had to get there my own way, but absolutely loved it.
Well, and serving in public office as lieutenant governor, right, I'm sure is a whole different scale, but at the same time, all of the fundamentals still play out like they're supposed to.
It's very interesting. I'm glad you made that observation, because I often thought about that. I often thought how much I learned from service on the Carbondale City Council that was really useful to me as lieutenant governor. And that's why I have to say I'm a big fan of Governor Pritzker right now. But I was not a supporter of his when he first ran for office because he's never been elected to anything before.
Yeah.
And I thought, you really need to have some experience. He's proved me wrong, and I think he's done a good job. But gosh, I've been at meetings of the Carbondale City Council where if we would have just taken a vote when the council walked in on an issue without listening to what everyone had to say, we would have decided one way. But then if we listened to what everyone had to say, we made a very different decision.
Yeah.
The child care at the Irma Hayes Center was one of those decisions. Big community involvement. And after getting a sense of that, I think we made a much better decision. We looked at a smoking ban in Carbondale before the state enacted one.
Yeah.
Came close to passing. I was a big advocate. Didn't pass. But again, they opened up all the partitions in City Hall, and the room was packed. And it was one of the biggest disputes that I had with former Mayor Brad Cole. And we get along now. We even wrote a column together, an op-ed in the Springfield State Journal-Register recently about running for office and what you get out of that and how you can work together no matter what. Anyway, he said, well, how about let's just limit it to 6 people from each side? I'm like, what? There's a room full of people. There's like 300 people here. We cannot limit democracy. And so what we did was a time limit for every speaker, but we let everyone who wanted to say something come up and say something. And it was really useful. We heard from a lot of different folks with more than just the superficial perspectives. Sally Carter from Hangar 9 talked about her concerns about what would happen to her business. People talked about their concerns about customers going outside of Carbondale because other places they'd be able to smoke. We heard from employees of restaurants and bars who talked about their concern for their own health. It was really moving, and I think we came closer. We didn't enact it then, but we came closer, and I'm not sure that didn't help, move the needle a little bit to get a statewide measure. I don't know. I have a fundamental belief that every time you get involved in the campaign, win or lose, you have an impact on the conversation. What conversation is being had? Don't you think so?
Yeah. I don't mean to seek out affirmations in these conversations. Sometimes they just happen, right? I was talking about John's yesterday and just talking way too much about, his strategy in building legitimacy with the conversations that the Institute has and essentially doing that same thing at a local scale with this project, but that just the same, right? There's when there is an issue to stand on it.
Right.
The outcome almost doesn't matter to some extent, the same as being willing to stand up and vocalize and move the needle, because even if it doesn't work like at the level of the local smoking ban, right? There could always be something else greater to pursue that meets that mission, and you just have to give it the time to play out. That's the other issue, that people want the immediacy. They want it turned over now. They want to see the result. They want to know that the work is just done and it's over with and we're there, but don't recognize that it takes the investment of energy, but you have to add time to it before you actually come to a solution. Right.
Absolutely. When I ran for mayor, a race in which I failed, I talked a lot about solar power for the city. And I had talked with Orr Beck, local solar guru, about what within the city would work well for solar power. And he said the water treatment plant. Lots of space, lots of power use right there. So that was what I went for. We need to get solar power out of the water treatment plant. And I didn't win the race. It didn't happen. Yeah. But you look at City Hall right now, and we've got those beautiful solar panels that you can see from multiple directions on top of City Hall. That thrills me. And I don't think that I laid the foundation or anything like that, but but I was part of a conversation, part of keeping the conversation going. The splash park in Carbondale. Gosh, there were a lot of people for decades who have been working on that. And if you look at it just one slice in time, if you look at one, it often came up as a tax referendum, right? Will you vote to add more taxes to yourself to build a Carbondale public swimming pool? And it was often turned down, I think largely based on race and the history of race in Carbondale. But people kept building on that effort. And now we have a public outdoor swimming pool in Carbondale. Yay, at last, yay. Not in time for you to be a kid swimming there.
But that's okay.
But, yeah, exactly. But we've got lots of kids swimming there now.
Yeah.
And it there was a wonderful book, I can't remember the author or the title, it was all about the history of swimming and public swimming. Interestingly, there was no racial segregation in swimming pools and bathing until they started mixing genders, right? Because the public swimming pools were all for men, except maybe they'd have a women's day once a week. And so everyone could come there. But then when they said, okay, men and women can come there together, that's when people said, oh, no, we got to probably not do that with different races together. So there's a lot of history of discrimination built into the history of public swimming. And one of the things that this author concluded at the end of the book was a good swimming pool will have lots of discrimination, will have lots of grouping of people, and it'll all be by age. And that's exactly what happens out there, right? It'll
all be by age.
Yes. The tiny people are in the zero depth pool. The teenagers are in the bigger pool. The grandmas, I know in the morning when you can go there and swim laps, are walking in the lazy river in an exercise class, and the middle-aged kids, the middle kids are sliding down the slide, and it's all strictly divided by age and nothing else. And it's beautiful.
What is it like to pursue policy, pursue an action or agenda item, whether you're the person or part of the group that kicks that over or not, but to see it come to fruition, and then on the other side, get to participate, right? We opened up with the conversation about biking. We're in here talking about the splash park now, but these are tangible things that you can look at and say, oh, I didn't just, we didn't just talk about it. Like, I get to engage in this now.
Right. It's fabulous. It's absolutely fabulous. When I was lieutenant governor, one of the things we worked on was a new tax in the state of Illinois. Not everyone boasts about that, but I boast about this one. It was a tax on strip clubs. We watched in Texas where they put a tax on strip clubs that serve alcohol because there's a known connection between strip clubs that serve alcohol and sexual assault in the area. Not much of a surprise. And of course, the strip club owners appealed that. They said it was messing with their constitutional rights to speak. And up the court system, they all said, just fine. No, that's not a problem. There's a close enough connection there. So we jumped on that and now have a tax on strip clubs that serve alcohol in the state of Illinois. It was a fascinating bill to work on because who knew that strip club owners were organized, hired a big lobbyist, and when I say big, I mean big. These were a bunch of big guys in dark suits against my overwhelmingly female staff in the lieutenant governor's office. But we reached it's not exactly like the Texas law. It's something that they said as a businesses, this would work better for us. I'm like, okay, if that works better. So now it doesn't support sexual assault services completely by any way in the state of Illinois, but it's some money that is regularly going to the Women's Center, to places all across the state that respond to sexual assault, that work on prevention of sexual assault, to be able to know that that's working. Yeah. It's a really cool thing.
Well, and you're touching on something that's beyond the particular instance of sexual assault and its connection to strip clubs, but the idea that we allow for things that have negative outcomes on the other end of them. We still allow for them, but then we try and introduce policy measures to offset for the negative things that occur because of that. Something that's sticking out in my mind is the casino coming in, right? And what policy you build around these things to understand, okay, it inherently, right, at surface level, entertainment is not an awful thing. It's not a bad thing, and that if people so choose to entertain themselves in this way, let them go. But then you hit a wall where you say, okay, well, now this is starting to have an impact on people's lives, whether it's something that's violent, something that's related to the financial health of somebody, whether it's related to mental health and services built around that. I don't know where I'm going with the question here. I'm just connecting the two and thinking, okay, yeah. Right, there are vices that we all have, and then we seek to engage in and enjoy life through. But then how do we put the guardrails on that when people do fall out of the safety curve on this, that there is a system there to catch them on the other end and provide support, provide services, provide some sort of repair to the damage that something that, while it's not damaging maybe 98% of the people that come through the door, it's those 1 or 2% of people that we really have to care about.
Yeah. So this is such a good question. I wrote an article about this last summer that will be coming out at some point soon at the University of Illinois Law Review about how we make laws about gambling. Because there's moneyed interest on one side and no one speaking on the other, right? You've got the people who can make money from the casinos, and I don't mean to deny them, the
participation in a free market.
Right, exactly. And they're well organized, and they can hire good lobbyists, right? One semester at the law school, I worked in the senior citizen clinic where we provide free legal services for people 60 and over. I'm not sure if that's the exact right age. Anyway, people who are in a tight spot, and we represented a man who had been essentially abandoned by his wife after she had spent the family's money, his pension savings, at the riverboat. And it was horrific. And this is like a normal family. This is a family with kids and community involvement and pillars of the community kind of thing, and this just destroyed the savings that they had literally worked a lifetime to build up. And it's their voices that are never going to get heard, because until they're having that problem, they don't know it's a problem. And then once they've had the problem, they're focused on just getting by. They're not focused on, and the next time I see my state senator, I'm going to talk with her about the issue of how gambling can be bad for our families. So it's a really good question. One of the interesting things, there's lots of ways that a legislative body can work. It can work because it's very representative of people, and you have someone there who had an uncle who spent his family's savings gambling or something like that. But we don't always have a guarantee of that. The coolest thing that I ran into in terms of a solution to that imbalance of who gets represented and who doesn't is in California, they have a rule for their state legislature that they must consider both sides of an issue, which I think is really cool. And I think we could maybe build into a practice in the process of lawmaking to say, okay, I will meet with you on your issue, whatever it might be, as long as you can identify for me the person who opposes you, and I'll meet with that person too, so that you can use the well-paid lobbyist to help you identify someone who's on the other side who's currently unrepresented. Is there a librarian in the community? Is there a social worker? Is there a minister who might be able to give the other side? And then a lawmaker, if you purposefully say, I'm going to listen to the people from my district. I'm not going to ignore people because I can't hear from both sides. But if I'm going to hear from one side, I'm going to ask them to help me identify who's on the other side so I can hear from both. And I think that might help us move in a better direction there and provide some of those safety measures. And there are some safety measures, right? There are measures that people can self-identify and call up the state gaming board and say, can you put me on a don't get into the casinos list? And they won't be able to come to the casino, which a lot of people need to do because it obviously is a big problem for some small percentage of people. Anyway, I've gone on way too long about that, but it's a really interesting issue about representation and democracy where we assume it always works, but sometimes the money really tilts things out of balance.
Well, and it's money can find itself manifested as so many different things, right? Money, when given to a lobbyist, is time and access and influence to over somebody. Money in terms of spent on advertising or paying people to write things or having influence over a newspaper, television station, a radio station, a internet news source that manifests in some sort of attempt to control exercise control over the public. And it's not so much the dollar itself is not the problem, it's what's done with the dollar on the other side.
Yes absolutely.
I had not expected for the gambling component to be so timely.
I'll have to send you a copy of the draft of the article. I think you'll like it.
I'm very interested in that. Shucks. Well, I'll do a complete pivot off of that then and into something kind of as we near the later stages of our conversation. So I live on a road that's got a family name on it, right? So just like many people around town have streets named for themselves, and it's kind of just a cool feeling that so and so was here before me, and our name gets to be on stuff. But you get to drive around town, bike around town, and see places that have placards with your name on it just the same. What is that feeling like? Is there anything that's like almost an out of body ethereal like experience? Just there's my name again, and it's on something that's a big deal.
Well, so it's a blast too. And in fact, when I'm going between Carbondale and McCanda, a drive that we often do, I'll purposefully go down the street that we're on here on Cherry Street to see the federal building. It says U.S. Senator Paul Simon, which I think is very cool. I love the bow tie on the McCanda water tower, although it looks like he needs a shave. It's a little bit dirty on the bottom side. I know they're going to clean that.
I mean, Josh Judge has been wanting to clean that for years now. Judge Services, as somebody that I've known since college time. And I feel like whenever that kicks over, whenever he gets the truck big enough, whenever he gets the ladder big enough to get up there, I'll see if I can connect you two, and we'll make it a big old event. See how that goes.
Yeah.
If Buncombe Water District will let people up there, who knows? That's the other trick. Oh, you mean there's an actual governing body that kind of oversees all this, and you got to get their approval before you can just go.
You go
hose it down.
But it's very cool. It's very cool. I love it. I love the water tower in particular. That
is just a landmark of Southern Illinois through and through.
Yeah. When Dad ran for president, Jeff Rowan, who lives down the road from Mom and Dad's house in McCanda, and who built Mom and Dad's house in McCanda, organized some folks, and they got a billboard not too far from the Smiley Tower that said, "Welcome to McCanda, home of presidential candidate Senator Paul Simon." and that was very cool. I know Jeff, when he sold his truck that he had at the time, tried to convince the buyer of the used vehicle. He said, "This is much more valuable because it's got a Paul Simon sticker on the back." I don't think it worked, but it was worth a try. Anyway, it's nice because it's a recognition of local folks who appreciated what Dad did.
Yeah,
that's cool. That's very cool.
Well, and then just the conversation on national. So I've got my 6-changer CD in my old Honda is stuck, and I have not been able to listen to the Paul Simon CD that I've had in there for years now, which I received because when WSIU held the viewing party for, oh my gosh, what was the film that came out post following your father's passing? And it was, I don't remember, there was a documentary, and then there was a CD. There's a whole package of media that they provided.
Yes.
Where am I going with? Oh, in the last track on there, having the wait, don't tell me piece on it. And then seeing things like, you can go back and find him on Saturday Night Live, find the clip from that. Did you get to go with on the Saturday Night Live gig?
I was not there. My brother went with him to New York for that. Perry and I were, he was running for president at the time. Perry and I were campaigning in, I can't remember, somewhere in eastern Iowa, and we were heading back to our apartment at the time in West Des Moines, this place called Old English Village, like with the fake Tudor beams. It was like the only place that would rent month to month. And we're driving back, and we're hoping we can get back to a TV set, and it was horrible snow. And as close as we could get was Grinnell, Iowa. And we're like, it's a college town. They've got to have a bar with a television on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
So we came in, and it was a kind of seedy bar. And I said, would you mind turning your TV to NBC? My dad's going to be on television there tonight. And they said, for how long? Just the beginning is all I need to see. And so we watched it at this seedy bar in Grinnell, Iowa. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, Dad's not, he's not built for comedy. And this live. And he did fine. He walked out with Paul Simon together, and they talked about how they got confused for each other, which is very sweet. And then Paul Simon, the singer, came and campaigned for Dad when Dad ran for Senate, so I got to meet him. And when they do events together, Paul Simon, the singer, would introduce my dad by calling him the tall Paul Simon, which my 5'9" dad loved. He was like, oh, yeah, I'm the tall Paul Simon.
That's funny. And that sounds so Carbondale in of itself, because you got tall Paul, we've got
there you go.
Old tall Paul. Man, that's crazy.
A different tall Paul, yeah.
Do you have any one person or a couple of folks that you've met throughout your life and throughout your journey that just stick out as like a wow moment, a wow person, a wow encounter that just it'll always be stuck with you?
So I remember when Dad was leaving the Senate, this would have been 1990-ish. Anyway, he was in the Senate, but it was his last term. And Perry and I went out over spring break. I was pregnant with Riley. And Dad said, well, this might be the last time you're out here while I'm a senator. Is there anyone you want to meet? And I said, I'd love to meet Janet Reno, the Attorney General of the United States. And Dad said, okay, we'll see if we can make that happen. And so we got to go meet Janet Reno, and we sat down in this waiting room, and Perry and I are just, just thrilled with the idea of just being there at the Justice Department. And the receptionist said, have a seat, and she'll be out here soon. And she walked down this long hallway, and we could see her walking down the hallway. We're like, oh my, this is so wonderful and amazing. And she had someone take a picture of us together, and she said, well, now that we've done that, let's go back to my office. And she got out her atlas of the United States. She says, tell me where you live. So we live in Makanda at the time. We live in Makanda. And she found that on there. She said, Chuck Grace is your U.S. attorney. He's a good man. And she talked with us for a while. I asked her what she missed about not being in Florida. She said she really missed child support enforcement cases, that she loved making sure that people who are trying to weasel out of their child support obligation had to pay. Yeah. And those are really fun cases to prove, the people who try and claim they have no money and yet have this much in their budget and their regular spending. So gosh, what a hero. And this was after she had already, said, in response to Waco and all the people who, there's the horror there, she said, I'd take responsibility. And I so admired that. Someone willing to say, yeah, that was a bad thing that happened. And yes, I'm the one in charge. And yes, whether I had anything to do with it or not, I'm the one who should take responsibility. And what a hero in that moment she was. So to get to meet her, that was pretty cool. Yeah.
That speaks to something, the accountability issue, right? That really, I feel like underpins a lot of our problems in our present discourse.
Yep.
Right. And that some people may look at somebody saying, I messed up, I own this is my fault, as not being enough, but it really is just that introduction into the next phase of conversation where the change happens.
Right. What do we do to make it better next time?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know you've been talking with a lot of Policy Institute people recently, which I appreciate. And I was thinking of the series of directors, and Mike Lawrence was one who, they've all been fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking with Mike before running for lieutenant governor, and talking about, well, things will go wrong. What kind of plans of action do you have for when things go wrong? He says, well, you have to know that things are going to go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You anticipate that. It's how you respond when things go wrong that counts. It's not whether you can absolutely prevent it, because you can't.
Mm-hmm.
And to be willing to take responsibility publicly when something does go wrong on your watch is a huge deal. Huge deal. And we don't see that often enough. We see a lot more finger pointing and blame shifting
Mm-hmm.
from leaders now, when we should see, yeah, that one shouldn't have happened, and I'm someone who could have prevented it from happening, but I am the person who's going to see to it that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is it. And I can't say that we're going to see to it that a conversation like this doesn't happen again. As we get later on in these, maybe in the 300 or 400s, we'll have some revisiting conversations. I think this would definitely qualify as one of the good ones to have. Episode 80 of the WTF Carbondale podcast. My guest, Sheila Simon. Have a good one, folks. Whatever that one may be.